Welcome back. Texas has 26 million people and one of the biggest budgets in the nation, but its lawmakers meet just once every 2 years. It joins Montana, Nevada, and North Dakota as the only states that don't gather their governments annually. But one Democrat from Laredo wants to change that. Representative Richard Pena Raymond is once again pitching his idea to alter a system nearly 140 years old. So this legislation about an annual budget session, you have proposed it for 3 sessions now. How is it actually making any traction?
Well, when you discuss it with anybody who follows the legislative process, the budget process, and certainly with members who have sat on the Appropriations Committee, it is clear that people believe that it's the right thing to do. And all you have to do is use common sense. When you look at the private sector, there's not a single business in the private sector that approves 2-year budgets. In other words, it says this is what we're going to make over the next 2 years, this is what we're going to spend over the next 2 years. When you look at local governing entities, schools, city councils, county commissioners' courts, they don't do 2-year budgets. Nobody does 2-year budgets. It doesn't make sense. In a state as big as Texas, where our annual budget is going to be from the mid-75 billion to 90 billion a year, that's a pretty large company. And our economy changes so much and is in flux, constantly in flux, because we're such a big state, that the trends change in terms of our income and our revenue and in terms of our needs. So when you talk to people, it is one of those things that I promise you, it will happen. We will eventually have annual budget sessions in the state of Texas, as most states do, and certainly as all the large states in the country do. But it's getting over that political hurdle where in the Republican Party, the Republicans are generally feel like they cannot be for it. But when you talk to people one-on-one, and I know because I deal with all these folks, they understand that it is a good idea.
So your proposal would be to basically have a session every year. One session would be about the budget, and then the other session would be everything else, correct?
Well, if my bill passed, first of all, it would have to go to the voters. The voters would have to approve it. It would be a constitutional amendment. So the regular session, the session we're having right now, we would pass a budget, but it would be a 1-year budget. And then the way it would work is that a year from now, we would meet again after the primaries are done, so you have most of the politics out of the way. We would meet again for up to 60 days and deal with a 1-year budget, nothing else. There wouldn't be anything else on the call. So those that rhetorically will say, oh, they're going to meet more often and have more bills, well, that's not how it's set up. It is set up specifically to work on the budget, on a 1-year budget. And so having worked on it for 8 years as a member of the Appropriations Committee, including as Vice Chairman of the Appropriations Committee, I know that it would be very efficient. We'd do things more in the way I think that we should, and so but it wouldn't lead to an annual session to deal with all these other bills. We can do that right now. The governor has a right to call us in, and has many times, for special sessions. And when he does, then we take up the legislation that he puts on the call. That's already in statute. That's already part of the Constitution. This would simply say, next year we'd meet. I think it would end up being 30 to 45 days at the most. And in terms of the entire legislature, you wouldn't be on the floor but for a handful of days.
Most of the legislators have jobs, and they're already spending at least 140 days out of, once every 2 years away from those jobs. So if they had to come back again, would that make things a little sticky as far as being able to pay their own bills and take care of their families? Well,
here's the thing. I mean, I've been in the legislature for a long time now, and I can tell you the way that it works. Again, if you're on the Appropriations Committee, you'd have to be here at probably 30 days, all right, in a session for an annual budget session. If you're not on the Appropriations Committee, you would be on the floor. I really don't think you'd be on the floor more than about 3 days, because when we take up the bill on the floor, it usually takes us a day of amendments. If it's a 1-year budget, it'll probably take less than that. And then it goes to conference with the Senate, and then it comes back for a straight up and down vote. So we generally don't spend more than 2 or 3 days on the budget on the floor. A lot of the work, obviously much of the work, is done in committee. But you know what? You don't have to serve on the Appropriations Committee if you don't want to. Would it be better for individual legislators if we didn't have annual budget sessions? No question. Would it be better for the state of Texas and for the people that we represent if we had annual budget session? No question. It would be better for the people of Texas.
Would the other issues that we deal with during the session, would they benefit from maybe having more time focused on them since you're spreading the financial side of everything out?
No question. The other thing is you make more informed decisions and you make better decisions. Look, if we'd have had annual budget sessions going back 2 years ago, when the Republicans, because it was the Republicans, my friends on the Republican side, when they cut $4.5 billion on public education, First of all, we'd had annual budget sessions. They might have made cuts in that first year, but going into the second year, right? By then our economy had begun to recover. By then we had more money, and certainly a significant amount of money in the rainy day fund. And so I think the second year of school funding, for example, public education and universities, higher education, that you wouldn't have seen those same cuts. You would have seen a reinvestment in public education and in higher education, because you would have had more money at that point. Same thing with Medicare, healthcare, Medicaid, healthcare in the state of Texas. You wouldn't have seen the significant cutback that you saw, because again, you would have had more revenues. You could have seen what the needs are, and you could have funded them.
All right, coming up, sweet-talking lawmakers at the state capitol, how these little lobbyists are making a big impact.
A lot of other states have desserts and not Texas. Since the pecan and the pecan tree are a state symbol, I think it would fit in perfectly.
Politics and pie. Here's a taste of what might be the next official state symbol when In Session In Depth returns.